Okay. Hi, everyone. We're just about a minute or so away from starting. I'm going to give it a couple minutes because I can see that people are just starting to join us. Hopefully you see my note in the chat. Feel free to use the chat to kind of jump in and let us know where you're joining from. But if you do want to ask any questions, go ahead and use the Q&A in the Zoom tool. So we'll give it just about a minute or so until we get started, because I'm seeing that number continuing to go up, and I want to make sure everybody gets a chance to hear all of it. Oh, let's see. Hello from Kansas City, Missouri. Fantastic. Lincoln, Nebraska, New Jersey.
My sister is a professor at UNL, so go Huskers.
Hold on. Oh, hold on. All right, I've got the closed captioner on. So let me see if I can get them set up.
Hello, I see names of colleagues and friends from around the world in our audience there. Hello, folks that are coming from the accessibility world. Lovely to have you join us.
Okay. Set up manual caption on. Sign up participant to type.
And the association world. I see several association execs in here too, so.
Okay, so now let me find the participants. I apologize, you guys. I have to get them on. Okay. Trying to get them signed as captioner. Or the participants, more, and then assigned a closed caption. Okay, hold on 1 second. Sorry, guys. Okay, while I'm trying to figure this out, we're going to go ahead and get started. Okay, so welcome everyone. Sorry about that. Hold on 1 second. So I am Tracy Grzybowski. I am the Director of Marketing here at Omnipress. And I'm so excited to have all of you guys joining us today for this really, really great discussion. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, if I can, for just a second. I'm suddenly having problems. I apologize. Or I'm not going to share my screen. That's okay. I'll just go ahead and talk. So I'm the marketing director here at Omnipress. And as you know, you are all joining us to discuss the very, very important topic of how to make your in-person educational events. So that would be in-person conferences and training sessions more neuro-inclusive. And I apologize because I'm trying to deal with the closed captioning issues that we are having, but let me walk through that in just a second. If you do have any questions during this session, please go ahead and use the Q&A, and I will be monitoring those as those go on. And then for the closed captions, if you click, we have a captioner on here, but I'm having a hard time getting it to work, so I apologize. Let me just get the caption settings going. Okay, there we go. I have turned off the manual captions. So what you guys should do if you want to see a live caption of this is go ahead and click the More button, which is on your menu. If you hover over the menu, click on Captions, and then click on Show Captions. and you'll have live captioning going right within the Zoom tool. Yay! Okay, sorry about that, everyone. But this gave everyone a chance to join us, so here we go. So this is an extremely, extremely important topic. I know a lot of organizations are looking at right now their diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, and we really want to make sure that that includes accessibility for your neurodiverse participants, because there are certain challenges that the in-person event experience presents to people who are neurodivergent. We've also found that this is something that a lot of people don't fully understand or have a harder time wrapping their heads around. So not only am I the director of marketing here at Omnipress, and we serve the in-person events industry, both conferences and training courses, but I am the mom of an autistic son and also the wife to a dyslexic husband. I have been spending 25 years as a student of neurodiversity and trying to understand this so that I can better support them. That's been 25 years. I can't imagine what this is like for anybody who's just stepping into this to try to wrap your head around it. So one of the things I really want to achieve here is to not only give you an idea of what it is you need to do, but really discuss the why. Because I've seen lists of, here's a checklist of things you should do, but how do we really understand how to support folks until we really understand why? What is it that we are supporting? What are we designing for? And I'll tell you, after 25 years, I'm still learning something new every single day. So I would imagine the rest of you are too. So without further ado, I want to go ahead and have each of our panelists introduce themselves. Sam, I will start with you.
Hello, my name is Sam Evans. I am in Atlanta, Georgia. I am many decades of working in the association world, which also means events for those organizations that host events. And my meeting planning mentor brought me up in considering accessibility many decades ago. I currently work for the International Association of Accessibility Professionals. So our members, volunteers, and leadership are all people who work in accessibility and inclusion around the world. So I have the great benefit of merging passions and profession.
Great, thank you. Megan, I'll turn it to you.
Thank you. My name is Megan Houghton. I am located just outside of Madison, Wisconsin. I am the development coordinator for the Autism Society of South Central Wisconsin. So I, in addition to fundraising and things like that, I run our educational and training programs. More importantly, I am a mom to two boys that have non-speaking autism. So this is pretty much my whole life. Work, personal life is just making the world a better place for my boys and individuals that have some of the same strengths and challenges that they do.
Wonderful. And Daniel, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. So hey everybody, I'm Daniel Wendler. I'm here in Austin, Texas, and I'm a clinical psychologist who is autistic. And so I do a lot of writing and speaking about autism and neurodiversity. And so I'm coming sort of from the perspective of somebody with personal experiences, both on stage and as an autistic attendee of events, for sort of what allows for the greatest amount of accessibility and inclusion.
Wonderful. Well, again, thank you guys for joining us. What I want to do is first make sure that I cover this very important piece, which is that this webinar is being recorded. It is going to be available. We'll send a link out to all of you who have participated and also those who were not able to join us today. And it is going to be available on our website at omnipress.com. Why don't we go ahead and get started? Because I have a feeling that we're going to have a lot more to discuss than we will actual time. So I wanted to start with just kind of setting a baseline and level setting on what exactly is neurodiversity? What does that term mean? And why is it so important to include considerations for neurodiversity in your DEI&A strategies? Daniel, I'm going to start with you on that question.
Yeah, I will jump on it. So I think that Neurodiversity, it's maybe best understood by sort of like being the combination of a couple of key ideas. I think one key idea is that like the diversity in how brains function is just the same as any other form of human diversity. Some people are tall and some people are short, some people are autistic and some people are neurotypical. One way is not better or worse than another way. It's just, part of the difference. And, we should celebrate that as part of what makes humanity, as cool and beautiful as it is. But then there are, certain kinds of differences that, because, they're not as typical, tend to be disadvantaged in the way that we tend to set up our society. And we might normally look at that and say, oh, like that's a problem. Like this autistic person doesn't know as well how to read body language. And so, that's a real deficit for that person. But then what neurodiversity sort of argues is like, well, actually, maybe instead of trying to make this autistic person more like a neurotypical person, maybe we could take a look at how we are creating our societies and creating our environments and see if we could create a way of inclusion where that autistic person might be able to engage just as well as everybody else. For instance, if instead of relying on body language to get across your point, you just sort of say, like some of my friends will sometimes be like, Daniel, this is a joke. And then they say the joke and then I'm like, oh, okay. Like like that allows me to enjoy the joke and the sarcasm perfectly well. I'm not unable or disabled to enjoy those things. I just needed a different accommodation than everybody else might need. And so neurodiversity is both an awareness of this form of human diversity, and then also this call to action to say, how can we set up our systems and cultures and organizations, events, etc., in a way that meets everybody's needs, not just the most typical needs.
Absolutely. Yes. I love that, because I feel like if we can serve everybody better, we serve everybody better, right? Megan, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, definitely. I think too, when we're looking at it and we think, well, this is a small population. It's not though. I mean, 20% of the general population is believed to be neurodivergent. Some places put that even higher at 30 to 40%, just due to problems with diagnosis or diagnosis later in life. We're talking autism, ADHD, dyslexia, OCD. I mean, there's so many terms that can kind of fall into this neurodiversity topic. And so when you think about that, you already have participants in your events that probably fall under that category. And when you embrace them, you're opening yourself up to so much more creativity, just differing opinions. And like you said, these changes can benefit everyone. Communication is going to be better, laying out those procedures, the organizational piece. Everyone is going to benefit from that. And it really just shows that everyone is welcomed. It's one thing to be aware, but saying that we accept it, that takes action. That means putting these accommodations into place so that we're not putting, an individual that's autistic, we're not saying, hey, you need to ask for what you want. You need to tell us. We're going to go ahead and put some of these policies and make some of these accommodations right off the bat. So we're not putting you in that position where you have to, feel like the problem and ask for all of these changes. I think that really takes that extra step of acceptance. That is so important.
That is great. Yes. Yeah. Let's make it a goal that no one has to feel like they have to mask who they really are in any way, shape, or form. Right. So Sam, how would you answer that question, especially the piece about why it's important to include neurodiversity in your DEI&A strategies?
So I think that as people look at accessibility and inclusion as part of their process, IDEA, JEDI, DEI&A, however, whatever alphabet soup we want to call it, but this inclusion effort is that the best way that we can illustrate that we are inclusive and welcoming so that people can feel that they can belong is by showing them. We can tell too, but show the people that you are welcome, because we have considered this in our planning. We want to show you in advance that we have already incorporated these elements. These things are available. I'm going to go ahead and list all of this out about our event, our considerations, our process, our activities, our space, and our engagement, and not put it on you by having a polite ask of, oh, if you need something, please tell us. Because the challenge there, especially if anybody has any sort of anxiety or concern or trepidation and having to mask, if we put everything out front and we clearly state what we have already included and show our inclusive nature of design of our programs, our activities, our locations, people will already know they can take one piece of concern and fear off the plate and say, they already see me. I can go to this.
Right.
I don't have to worry about that piece of the puzzle, because there's a whole list of things that people bring with them when they live in any type of underrepresented, underserved, and oppressed group, is that we have to wonder, can I do it? And how much work is it going to be on me to just start to participate? So not forcing people to disclose is huge, because automatically, you don't have to disclose because you're already welcome as you are. Come as you are. We meet you where you are. We meet you as a human. You are welcome. And the concept is not hard to do, but putting it in place in practice in event planning requires some really dedicated, explicit actions. And most of that will happen on an event website or information or communications. And that has to start all the way back at the beginning of how we plan for it.
Sure. No, very, very well said. So kind of moving from why we should be doing this into the why we need to take some of the steps that we do, without digging too much into the weeds on the science of it, but giving enough information. What are some of the key things that people who aren't familiar with neurodevelopment disorders like dyslexia, like autism, what should they know or understand about what's happening in the brain, what that experience is like for that person that's going to be different than for a neurotypical person? Megan, I'll start with you on this one.
Perfect. Yeah. I think a big thing to keep in mind is that there's so many different factors impacting a person's experience, right? Because the neurodivergent factors, it changes everything from how they process the world, how they experience things, their senses. So you could walk into a room and there could be a variety of factors impacting you. The smells that are around you, the lights, the extra noise, a lot of conversation, and all of those things just become overwhelming in the body. And this can lead to, things out of control, like a meltdown or a shutdown, which is not something you want to have to be dealing with in that event space, communication going out the window. And so I think, plus when you add in longer processing time, it can take individuals that are neurodivergent a longer time to process information the way the rest of us, can kind of take that for granted. And so having that extra time for them to process everything is so important in those situations.
Because, obviously I've done a lot of my own self-study in this, right? As well as reading up on a lot of it. And we wrote an article on our blog that kind of gets into this a bit, but I think something that's fundamental for people to understand that what these neurodevelopmental disorders really truly are is a difference, not necessarily a deficiency, but a difference in how the brain takes in and processes information. A lot of that information might be coming from sensory, but it's information that's coming from a lot of different areas of the brain. And it really is amazing how much we rely on some of that connectivity between different aspects of the brain to come together very quickly, to fill in gaps, to fill in context. If you're not in a situation that's exactly like a situation you've been in before, a lot of us can navigate it because our brain fills in the gaps for us. That's not necessarily the case when you have neurodevelopmental disorders. And that's really kind of the fundamental starting point of where some of these experiences start, I think. Daniel, how would you add to that, I guess? How would you elaborate on that from your own experiences?
Yeah, I think that there's definitely a big component where I think that an experience, for a neurodivergent person, could be very different than for a neurotypical person, because I think that the sensory experience could be like received differently. Like, we're both hearing the same, vacuum cleaner going, but maybe for one person, that's just sort of a mild annoyance. Whereas for another person, like that's perceived as though it were like a jet engine screaming in your ear or something like that. And so to sort of recognize that, like, somebody could be experiencing the same sensation, but it's either amplified or potentially muted for them. I know that I was, when I was growing up in Minnesota, like I would walk around in shorts and people would be like, aren't you cold? I'm like, no, like I like it. But actually for me, like the sensation of the pants on my leg was more uncomfortable than the sensation of the cold air. And so my sensory experience, it was just different. And so I think that recognizing that as one component is really important. And then I think recognizing also that the meaning making that is maybe being attached to something might be different, in that for instance, maybe there's a chance for some small talk or a cocktail hour or something, and then a neurotypical person might see that as, oh, like this is fun, or this is a chance to get to know people. But a neurodivergent person might see it as, oh, this is a chance to fail, or this feels pointless. Like, I want to get to know people more deeply. Why am I doing small talk? And so something could be received in like even though the intention is maybe that it's a positive experience all around, sometimes a thing could feel like it's, you got to go out there and you got to slay the dragon, and everybody else around you is having fun, and that can be very isolating.
Right. Yeah, there's definitely a soft skills component to any educational event, whether it's a course or it's a conference, that comes into play. And as a neurotypical person, if you think about, well, how do I know that? How do I know that if someone stands this way, it means X, or if someone approaches me a certain way, it means X, or how to start a conversation with someone? You probably can't really remember, if you're neurotypical, like, well, how do I know that? You just kind of do, because you pick up cues. And again, your brain stores that information and it creates these connections within different parts of the brain, where you just kind of know how to do that. It's the same way with someone with dyspraxia, another neurodevelopmental disorder. I just know how to pick up my pen. I don't have to think about it. But if those connections are weaker, if they are harder to connect, if they take longer to connect, you don't just know how to do certain things. And so I think a big thing about preparing your events is don't take any of that for granted, that anybody's just gonna know because they've been to a conference, or because this is some type of social convention or norm. Those connections are not necessarily established. I think it's the same for people who are dyslexic too, with reading. Those connections between taking in the information in the language and processing it out are not there, or not as prominent. So Sam, you had something to say to that.
I was just going to say, one of the ways as we're planning events and activities, one of the ways that we can approach explaining the dynamics of things also will be very helpful for people from other cultures and other practices, where what neurotypical Americans may consider an everyday thing may not be what somebody from another country, another ethnic background, another religious or cultural background would know. So it's always nice and good and welcoming to put explanations about the activities that's going to provide background for those who may not be familiar, and possibly ways to process and understand what's about to happen for anybody that processes information differently. That removes an expectation that you're an adult, you should know how to do this. Because guess what? Lots of adults don't know how to study, and this is something people consider happens way back, but all the processes are different. So this will be a small networking activity where people will wander around. There's not structured activity. People will mill around in this space. There will be music, there'll be food served, there'll be drinks. Instead, people may approach one another to strike up conversations or find friends and colleagues that they've already met. So people might know what that means when they walk into a space. So there are ways that we can explain the activities that are going to serve many, but also may remove anxiety or concern, or people go, that's just not for me. I can't do that. I'm going to just have to self-care and not be in that space. So there's ways that we can talk about how we market our activities and explain the events as well. that will provide the context. Registration lines will be long. Come early on Wednesday evening between 5 and 7. Bring your driver's license, your registration packet, or your QR code on your phone. Have these things ready. You will receive a bag, a lanyard, and you can attach your name badge to the lanyard or use to attach it to your clothing. This will be your entry to all of the activities. If we can put those kind of things in place and allow people choices to find the best pathway for success and not present surprises, promise, neurotypical or neurodivergent, those kinds of guidance pieces will make things feel less daunting and more likely to succeed. So there are ways that we can approach things, and we can do it intentionally for different processing pathways, but it's going to benefit everyone in our audience.
Great, great. Yeah, that leads a bit into my next question, which we've touched upon some of this in some of our discussions so far, but understanding that neurodevelopmental disorders like autism, like dyslexia, like ADHD are really about how information is processed and how it's connected to other information in other areas of the brain. What are some of the challenges that the in-person educational experience, so again, either at conferences or sitting in in-person courses, what are some of those more common challenges that exist for neurodivergent participants that may not for neurotypical participants? Sam, I'll start with you on this one.
So I think if we're talking about, my brain, so I have dyscalculia, which is math, but it's also spatial relationships. So for me, spaces and places are a challenge for me. So I need to walk the space or have some kind of personal gauge about distances and size. And so for me, when I think about courses in person, particularly about the space, what is the lighting like? What are the acoustics like? For anybody, whether they speak, if English is the presentation, if that's not their primary language, do we have accurate and usable captions? For people who have, auditory processing disorders, that also captions help there. Have the materials been provided in advance so that if I need more time to process, whether that's for reading, visually, or thought, have it in advance so that I can participate along with everyone else. And is the presenter being inclusive in the way they engage? They allowing time for people to listen, process, think, and respond. Those kinds of things are what come to mind for me first. But for me, in spaces, making sure that people are not crowded, that there's passageways that are clear for some space, like breathing room. I know that we try to pack as many people as we can into small spaces, but that is overwhelming for many people. So in my perspective about the space for courses, before we get to the content, is the space someplace that I can manage? I know where the exits are. I know where the bathroom is. This is where the speaker is going to be. This is where the speakers are if I need more, or the screen for captions. Can I have my information ready? Okay, I'm ready. I can be present. And then what the presenters do and how they do. So that's my thought. That's more of an experiential explanation, but
no, it's true. It's true, because it is that upfront anxiety about what to expect, because again, I'm not gonna just know, I'm not necessarily going to just quote unquote figure it out, is going to create a lot of anxiety for people even leading into it. And when there is that level of anxiety or heightened emotion, it makes people less available to learn. Daniel, do you have anything to add to that? What are some of the major challenges that in-person educational experiences present?
Yeah, I think one component that I would sort of address is that a lot of times there can be sort of like a sense of loss of control. Like, am I going to be in this event, and then if maybe I decide that it's not for me, or the noise is too loud, or I just need a break, like, am I going to be able to leave? Am I going to be able to, if there's part of it that I am willing to engage with that would benefit me, but part of it that would be uncomfortable, am I able to sort of say no to that? And it can sometimes be very like small things. Like for me, I really don't like stickers on my skin, right? Like just something about that, just And so if there was like an activity where it's like, oh, like put this sticker on you, and then, we're going to divide people into groups, that like, I would be like, it's sort of like, okay, well, I want to engage in the activity, but that kind of means like I got to pick up a cockroach to do it. And do I have the ability to say no thank you to the sticker, but still engage, or step out of that? Like, so I think that there can be this fear that like, if I get on this, it's like I'm locked into a roller coaster and I don't know where it's going to go. And I think that part of that can be addressed by, what Sam was talking about earlier, of like having this very detailed description of this is what's going to happen, this is what's going to be involved. But I think to also give people the ability to adapt their own experience and kind of on the fly be like, yeah, I thought that this was going to be okay, but actually I need to step back. I actually just want to watch for this part. I need to put on my headphones and kind of tune out for 5 minutes. Any of those things I think are going to be very helpful. And if those aren't there, then it, again, participating in an event feels like it's a very scary commitment, or at least it can.
Sure. Megan, what would you add to that question about some of the challenges that the in-person experience presents?
Yeah, I think we covered a lot of them. I think what else kind of comes to mind is food can be a big one. Are we eating at this event? Is it going to be food that I'm comfortable with? Can I bring my own food? Am I going to be forced to eat something in front of a group? And what if I don't like it? What if I have a sensory issue with it? So I think that's another big one. And I know we talked a little bit before too about conversations and like socializing time, not knowing what those topics are going to, be. Is it small talk? Is it in depth about, is there going to be group conversations about the presentation? But I think the bigger picture here with all the factors that we've kind of talked about is just really stressing the importance of how much prep time is needed for an event like this. I mean, these are just a handful of the questions that are going to be going through someone's mind when they're just trying to prepare for that event. It's not just a wake up and be like, all right, I have an event tomorrow. No, it takes, days, if not weeks, to think through all of these steps to make sure safe places, exit plans, what you're eating, when you're using the bathroom, where you can use the bathroom, all of those things just highlight how much prepping goes into an event like this.
Yes, absolutely. And again, I mean, that's just even, as you mentioned, before you even get to the educational content, so that you are feeling kind of regulated enough to be available to take in whatever the educational content is. What about, so a lot of what we've talked about has been around a lot of the experience kind of wrapping the educational content. Do you guys have any thoughts around the actual education part of an in-person education event, whether it's a conference or an instructor-led course that might be even, smaller group in some type of classroom or workshop setting? Are there some inherent challenges when it comes to how that content is presented and delivered? Daniel, I'll start with you.
Sure. I think that one of the major challenges that comes to mind for me is that the aspects of something that might be difficult can really vary based on just differences, between a person. And so to try to teach, especially if it's a skill or something of that nature, to try to be like, where is the stuck point going to be for this person? It can be a little bit hard. You don't want to take 10 minutes out of the talk to address something that most people won't have a problem with, but you also don't want to leave somebody behind if they're like, actually, I couldn't quite get past this step. And so I think it can be difficult, but some of the ways to address that, one way is sometimes be able to have like small groups where people can maybe work on something with other people. Somebody else in the group might be able to assist them if there's a little break in the presenter talking. And then one thing that I've also done a lot of is weaving in references to outside resources. So it's sort of like if I'm teaching a skill, and then it's like, hey, this skill is kind of dependent on this earlier foundational skill. If you don't have that, or if you'd like to learn more, here's a resource that I've identified that's going to allow you to then on your own time, build that up. That can sometimes, I think, be pretty effective. The one other component that I would also add in is to try to present things in a little bit of a multimodal kind of way, because some people are going to engage better with the story, some people are going to engage better with an activity, some people are going to engage better with a bunch of facts and figures. And if you have a mix of those things, then even if somebody might not engage, ideally with all parts of your presentation, they're going to be able to walk away with something that they can use and benefit from.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Megan, would you add anything to that?
I think there's definitely, when we're talking about visual content too, some things that can be put in place. So, not having very distracting backgrounds on your images and things like that, keeping the graphics more simple, especially if there's a lot of text, so that you can focus on that. Having the closed captions, not doing a lot of videos with crazy sounds, just kind of respecting some more of those sensory challenges that can come in when trying to absorb information, but being distracted with other factors, I think can be important.
Okay, great. Sam?
So I read something yesterday and I chuckled at it, because it was a whole presentation about education and training that said, let's get rid of the idea of different learning styles. I just want to go full stop. Just full stop, because the reality is, when we talk about, and there's a concept called universal design for learning, which talks about multi-mode, multi ways of engagement, and multi ways of processing, and multi ways of expressing. So I'm going to call no on dismissing different learning styles, because processing disorders and different modes of processing are very real, which means people do have different styles of learning. So if you're teaching, training, or delivering, be able to explain it in multiple ways. If ever you were in college or in classes somewhere where a professor just said, it's black and white in the book, I don't know why you don't understand the concept. Well, I don't have a PhD in it, and I'm learning it for the first time. And Daniel, you have a PhD, so I'm sure you can explain things really well. But there are lots of things that people are coming to learn for the first time, or they are just beginning. And so if we are going to call ourselves a teacher or an instructor, we have to be able to explain in multiple modes, in different methods of delivery if we have the chance, and to make space for questions. And that may be part of the why we present our materials in advance, so that people can look through it and have their questions they have in advance, or go to those references and resource lists, so that they can come in well prepared to launch into the learning. So universal design for learning is going to call back on some of those processes. But we do have to consider, if you're in your audience and you're expecting neurotypicals to look at you and smile and nod, if you see somebody that is looking at you with a blank stare or like fear, as a presenter, you can pause for a moment and take that as a chance to say, let's stop for a minute. I see some faces that might want a little bit more information. Let's go back. This is a place where this might not be really clear, or I've done this before. So there are methods as an instructor and a presenter. You can pause and create natural breaks to allow people to take a breath, take a pause, ask a question in a safe space.
Absolutely.
If I could
Absolutely. Go
just
ahead.
jump
No,
on
go ahead.
that real
Yeah.
quick, because I think I wanted to say, this idea of having multimodal teaching, having breaks to check and stuff like that, this is very helpful for neurodivergent people, but this is just going to make you a better presenter for everybody, right? Even if somebody is fully able to just pick up everything from reading the textbook, having some pictures or a story in there, I think most people would say that helps me learn it better. Or in your presentation, if you've got, subtitles on your video, even somebody who can hear that, they might be able to comprehend it better if they can read it at the same time. And so the more ways you allow people to access what you're trying to teach them, it just helps everybody. Although of course it helps neurodivergent people the most.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we've talked a lot. We've already kind of hit on a number of these, and I'm sure we could just talk about this part all day. But what are some of the things you would like to see organizations do to be more neuro-inclusive at their educational events? So kind of let's start at the top. We talked about kind of that pre-event prep. And I think, Sam, you summed up some of this really well. If you want to just kind of reiterate some of that. So before your event, here are some key things to do.
So in my ideal world, if every event planner could do this, and I saw it first at a conference about accessibility, or the day before the event, they invite anybody with a disability or with any kind of neurodivergent considerations to come and walk or roll the space, to understand the spatial relationship between rooms, to understand how much time it will take when there are people in the space to get from room to room, to know how to map out your plan and sit and it's almost like a first timer's guide to the event. You've never been here before, you've never been to the place before. And so the opportunity to present that in advance and to put it on your website and your communication materials. First time attending, here's your tips and tricks, things you need to know about arriving from the hotel, from the airport to the hotel, transportation. We can't assume everybody knows. And it doesn't mean, I saw a comment in chat, it doesn't mean you're dumbing anything down. It makes sure that we are being explicitly clear so that we don't set anybody up for making a mistake or forgetting a step along the way. When everything is laid out that way, if people are like, yeah, got it, they'll skip it. But I promise you, there will be people who will find that helpful. I have professional staff that come to me and go, I've never been to a conference like this before. What do I need to know? Those are staff. So if we do that, but I really love the tour too, to say, let's take a look at the ballroom. If you come in from this door, the stage will be ahead. If you don't want to sit in the tables in the rounds or in the theater style, there will be chairs along the wall here, which might be more comfortable for you. And if you need to exit quickly, you'll find doors here, 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 and here. Bathrooms are down the hall, the quiet room is here. So letting people know that there's lots of people who are going to have reasons they need to leave, come and go. We're going to make sure that the lighting, we're going to say, when you come in, the stage, the lights in the ballroom will come down. It'll be slightly dimmer, but it won't be completely dark. The stage will be well lit. Speakers will be here. So things that people can consider getting to know the space. It's like a tour, like a 360 tour of a home. But this is, if you can do it with your iPhone the day before the conference, if you can do it in person, so much the better. But those kinds of tours are really good ways for people to get familiar with the space and the place and the time before the crowds, before the noise, before the throngs, before the clock is tick-tock tick. There's some really great examples from conferences that do this. It was specifically designed for disabled people to map the space cognitively. Particularly, I saw it first happen for people with physical disabilities and people who are blind, but I see more people on the neurodivergent side of life taking great advantage of this to be like, okay, and have a concierge, if people are interested, can you help me map out my day? There are 12 tracks, there are 3 buildings. If we can let people have a safe place, first timers come early arrival, we're going to have an orientation, we'll help you map out your program. Those kinds of safe places where you can do things in a one-on-one dynamic are really super. And it also makes people feel like they're not alone. And it doesn't mean they have to stand out with a big sign on their head that says, hi, it's my first time here. So those are welcoming things. Those are orientation things. Those are ways to help people map and engage and find their pathways and find their ways in and out. Finding ways out to let people know how they can get out in a way are really important, because if somebody gets into a flight mode, everything else is going to go out the door. So they need to go out the door, but which door? Which direction? So those kinds of guidance programs, they're not a lot of effort. It's not resource intensive, but it can make a world difference for each person. New attendees, people from other cultures, languages, differences, and different neurodiversity considerations. So really simple, but it's like having your welcome committee think about this. If somebody's never been here, what do I most need them to know? So if I could dream it up, this is what every conference would do.
Okay, great. So let's talk about kind of during the event. And again, we've talked about some of these things already. I know there's the idea of having kind of a safe space, a quiet space, a designated space. Let's talk about that a little bit. Megan, what would you speak to with that of having space within the conference or within the course for people to be able to go where they need to go, do what they need to do, take a break?
Yeah, I think offering those quiet spaces, those calm spaces is a great option. Color schemes, calming, you can have fidget toys, noise canceling headphones, any items that might be comforting and help individuals in those situations. I also think the extra communication, like having signage, making them easy to find, clearly labeled, I think giving out maps. I mean, the tour, that's an amazing idea, but having a physical map too, so you're not trying to remember that. You have that visual support with everything clearly labeled. But just making it as predictable as possible. So, is that quiet room available to me at all times? Do I have to sign up? Can I go in the middle of a session? The more information you can give out, the better. Nothing taken for granted. It might come natural to us. We might just, oh yeah, everyone knows that. No, be very explicit, dress code, eating, break times, parking, all of that. Just providing as much of that as possible before the event, I think, is a huge help.
Right. Daniel, what would you add to that?
So I think there's two components that I'd add that are a little bit variations on the same theme. I think one is that to the extent possible, I would try to include neurodivergent people both in the planning process and being on stage. And obviously I'm a little biased because I'm a speaker. I want every conference to come include me, but there's a lot of really like people with really strong messages, a lot to teach, and being able to like center those folks I think is really critical. And then I think after the conference or the event, being able to gather feedback from all attendees, but especially for neurodivergent people, especially for people that might have a harder time being the ones that are just spontaneously going to email you and tell you what you think. I think that's really the only way that you're going to be able to identify where are the areas that we kind of fell short and could do better. And so being really deliberate to like reach out to people, give people different options. Not everybody wants to take a survey, but maybe some people might be willing to write an email. Some people might be willing to do a quick interview with one of your staff, but find multiple ways where people can give you their sense of what went well and what didn't. That's the way that you're going to get stronger as an organization and do even better next time.
Absolutely. And just from my point of view, I think one thing to think about sort of when you're planning these events, you really think about how to build in flexibility and choice in every aspect of the event. I'm even thinking about things we talked about food. So this is just a really simple thing. But if you think along these lines, like if you're offering a pasta bar, have the pasta separate from the sauce, for instance. Like how can you take something that you're going to do and make it more flexible? Seating arrangements within a room. Can you have different types of seating available so people have the opportunity to sit where they might be more comfortable rather than, oh, I'm crammed in a row with, 100 other people. I can go to the back of the room where it might be a little bit quieter, or the front of the room, or what have you. So always thinking about kind of that flexibility and choice, and not, I'm going to put everybody in this one box in my event.
And I think just, if you don't mind, just going off of that too, when we talk about some of these accommodations we can make, those also aren't a one size fits all. So everyone's experience is going to be different. So there's a lot of things to try, and gaining that feedback afterwards is going to be huge, because not everyone who is neurodivergent is going to want the same accommodations. Everyone's experiences, everyone's strengths and challenges and needs are going to be different. So it's not like a black and white, okay, we're going to do these 10 steps and anybody who's neurodivergent is going to feel great here. It's a learning curve, and that flexibility piece is huge, I think, with it too. And just thinking of it as a journey, constantly learning, constantly adding to your plan, taking that feedback, making changes, making it better for the next time, but just showing that you're being willing to try and you're willing to keep learning and growing in that idea of, neurodiversity, I think is huge.
That's a great point. I know when we've talked in the past, you've talked about how even for the Autism Society of South Central Wisconsin, the programs you guys are still having to do a lot of testing, adjusting, reacting, improving.
Yes. Yeah. We can plan an event and think it's going to be great, and there are still going to be families where it's still not going to work for them. And, maybe there's extra steps we can take. It's not a one size fits all. It's not one solution. So just constantly learning and being flexible, I think, is just something not to be discouraged and give up, but keep thinking of it as a journey where you can keep growing and keep learning and keep making accommodations, and it just gets better and better.
Absolutely. So we've got a number of questions that have come in that I want to kind of start addressing. there's been a number of questions that are kind of around the same theme. So this discussion is primarily for the folks who are designing and planning these events or the content within these events. But you've got two other groups of people, and then some, who are also very much involved in these events and that affect the experience. And that is the speakers and the other attendees. So we've been getting in quite a bit of questions about, how do we train the speakers to be better at how to be inclusive in their delivery, how to recognize and understand and be okay with if someone has supports, if someone has to get up and walk out of the room, those types of things. So we'll start with the speakers first. Do you guys have any suggestions or recommendations for how to get them on board with this initiative, I guess, or this strategy? Sam, I'll start with you.
I have seen some really great progress made in professional societies where when people have agreed to be a speaker, that there's a set of instructions about slides, instructional about how to put your slides together, which is great. One thing that I hear and I chuckle at, and I saw this again not too long ago, is making sure presentations, digital space is cheap. Don't put more than 6 lines of text on your slide. There's some basics you could teach about that, but always use a microphone. It's not just because, you don't have a teacher's voice, but it's for the audience. It's for the other person. It's not about you and your ability to I don't know what the words are, to vocalize loudly, but it's for clarity for other people in the room. So always use a microphone. But one thing that's really important, if you have speakers who are not part of your community, that don't have part of your psychological safety background and considerations, is to put some of that in place about we are a welcome and inclusive environment. This is going to include for these groups of people. And you may need to be explicit to tell presenters that come in from outside sources. We will have people of a variety of different types of processing and backgrounds. People will and are perfectly able to get up and leave. You may find people and so we kind of do some disability sensitivity introduction for speakers and presenters, including things like people will wear headphones. That's okay. People may twitch and fidget. That's okay. People may move around at the back of the room and walk around. It's okay. So we kind of do some orientation to disability sensitivity as part of our psychological safety. But we also talk about things that are what's okay in jokes. Things about sex are not okay. Things about violence are not okay. Poking fun at somebody getting up and leaving is not okay. The things that are humorous that people may have in past thought, oh, it's funny. Look, obviously I'm not doing a good job. Look, we see Darren over there has gotten up and left. Absolutely horror show for somebody. So, but we have to introduce some of those let's not do this anymore concepts so that people can start to change.
Absolutely. Daniel, what would you add? I know you speak quite a bit as well. And so I'm sure you get, the pre-event communication and instructions and what have you. And what do you see as missing a lot of the time?
Well, I think what I would say is that the bar is very low, because I have very rarely had an event that has talked about this at all. And so even if you have, just one meeting with your speakers, even if you have, here's a PDF that I want you to read and sign that has the bullet points of what you're going to do, even if we're going to do one rehearsal where we're going to give you feedback on making it inclusive, like those steps are going to put you ahead of the game for a lot of other events. And obviously that doesn't mean that like that's all you need to do, right? Like, we want to always be improving and getting better. But I think that the major thing that I would hit on is that it's not that this is like you got to get to the top of Mount Everest before these things will matter. Like everything you do is going to make an impact for your audience, and it's going to be it's going to raise the bar for everybody else, because right now the bar is way too low.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, it's great that it's an opportunity. So let's make that happen. It's disheartening that it's such an opportunity right now. But again, I mean, a lot of folks, I know everyone's got a lot on their plate, and this isn't something that's top of mind for people to really think about. And that's part of what we're trying to do here. So that's great. Let's talk about the attendees, the other attendees. How do we help prep our own attendees to be more understanding of neurodiversity and, you know, what that might look like at an event, and to also help support people at the event, especially when it comes to that social interaction, the networking, and other pieces of that. Have you guys come across that at all?
I can jump in real quick and say that I think one of the things that can help the most is to have like ways, sort of like guidance for how to interact and engage. And so sometimes, for instance, I've been at places where like people can, on their name tags, they can sort of have a color scheme that sort of shows, you know, like I want you to approach me, I don't want you to approach me, or you can approach me, but I'm going to be nervous about it. And so those sorts of things can help somebody else be like, oh, this person might be giving me very standoffish signals, but they have a green name tag. And so maybe this is somebody that would like me to come say hi to them. The other thing that I think can be really useful is to be able to kind of model from the stage, if possible, some of those things. And so that's, again, another argument for bringing in people that are neurodivergent, you know, to speak or whatever. But if somebody, you know, if I'm on a stage and I'm able to sort of share from my experience what's helpful to me, or if I'm able to say, hey, for myself, I need this, it makes it a lot easier to then, you know, for audience members to then extend that to somebody else.
Okay. Well, and it seems like too, Sam, a lot of the pre-event communication you were talking about really benefits all the attendees and kind of sets that stage so people can go into it with that more of an acceptance mindset, I think. So what about, we've also had some questions too about the venues, you know, and working with the venues to make sure that they have the space and that they have the resources to support these efforts. Megan, I know you guys put on a lot of different events and things. What are some of your considerations?
We do. We've gone into spaces and we look for, you know, are there quiet areas, areas that are easily accessible and viewable, but are going to be away from the crowd and going to be away from excessive noise. We've talked with lighting, you know, about lighting, fluorescent lights, for example, for our community and the autism community. That's a big trigger for a lot of individuals with the headaches and the sensory aspect. So, you know, looking to see where we can reduce some of that lighting or turn some of it off. You know, if there's, if it's generally something, an area where there's music playing, you know, can we have that quieter? Can we turn that off completely? So we look at some of those more sensory aspects for how we're planning things, you know, making sure there's good flow, making sure, you know, places are spaced out so we're not getting large groups, especially with like registration and welcome tables, you know, making sure that we can have enough workers there so lines aren't getting loud and, you know, there's that time for anxiety in crowds. So those are some of the factors we look for when picking spaces.
Okay, great. Sam, do you have anything to add to that? I know this is always top of mind for you.
I think in properties, especially convention centers and hotels, tell them to turn the fragrance pump off. Fragrances are a real issue for a lot of people, whether it's an actual olfactory reaction or it's just sensory overload. They can turn it off. If you don't ask, you don't have the option. But considerations of light changes when we come from really bright spaces into darker spaces, that's a lot of input to process. So keeping things not really dim against places that are really bright. Your AV company, talking to them about the ability to use LED versus fluorescent, where you might be able to dim spaces in some places if requested, if you have a photosensitive person that is going to be presenting. So asking your AV company before you hire them, if you have the choice, your convention center, about spaces, transportation, exit, and their understanding of emergency exit procedures and processes, so that they are aware and have staff I try to have at our events and have always had before the show where we do a staff training for the property. If you're going to be here for the next week with my people, here are things that you need to know. And so that's basic teachings about things about our blind and low vision colleagues, our deaf and hard of hearing colleagues, the people with cognitive and processing disorders, things to consider and know. And here's a to do and not to do kind of a thing, so that they aren't unintentionally in their effort for customer service breaking into spaces or places or comfort zones, because it's not given. You can't take that for granted in facilities.
Right, right. Well, I know we're just about at time, so I just wanted to quickly wrap it up with go around and if you have any 'cause this is just the start of what is going to be a big conversation. And I think the more we talk about this, the better. The more we start asking for these things from our venues, the more that they will start proactively providing them. So let's ask. The more we ask these of our speakers, the more they will be trained to think about this as they're putting it together. So let's keep this going. Any recommendations for resources, and how could people potentially follow up with you or get connected with you if they want to continue this conversation? Daniel, I'll start with you. I know you had to jump off real quickly here, so I'll go ahead and start with you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So I think to kind of hit everything you mentioned real quick, I think the biggest thing that I would really want to leave people with is that everything you do matters. Obviously, there's always going to be something new to do, something more, but like, the things that you do, they do make an impact. People like me who are neurodivergent, like we notice, we see it, we appreciate it. You never want to rest on your laurels, but a little bit does go a long way. And so don't be discouraged if you're listening to this stuff and you're like, oh, I couldn't get all of this, past the board, or I couldn't. Do what you can. It's going to matter. I think in terms of other resources, I think that the major thing that I really would recommend, there's a lot of publications out there, but I would try to listen to the neurodivergent people in your community, because they're the people who are attending your event, the people who are accessing your organization. Those are the ones that are going to be able to tell you the most what you need, rather than some outside expert. And so I would try for that if you can. And then if you did want to talk to an outside expert, though, you can be in touch with me, danielwendler.com, just my first, my last name. You can hear more about like my speaking, my books, and the contact form there goes straight to me. So if you've got a question or you just want to share your favorite cat meme with me, I'm all ears.
I wanted to let you know too, I didn't get a chance to tell you this, but your website, improveyoursocialskills.com, I have shared that with my son, and he is very actively parsing through the content. So
Awesome.
Very excited about that. Okay. Well, if you do have to jump off, go ahead, but we'll continue this same thing. So I'll turn that to you, Megan. Any recommendations for resources and continuing the conversation with you?
Yeah, well, I definitely agree with everything Daniel just said. I think talking to the neurodivergent people in your community is the best place to start. Obviously, I am involved with the Autism Society, and we have affiliates all over the country. So we'll get pulled in a lot of places. We have autistic adults on our board. We have a volunteer group, an advisory committee. So they will go into places and help, companies and organizations that are trying to host events. They'll go in and kind of do a walkthrough and take notes of, here are things that were hard for us, or here are things that we think can be improved. So always reaching out to different organizations like that to get an extra set of eyes, to provide that feedback as well. And I'm Megan at autismsouthcentral.org if anyone wants to follow up as well.
Wonderful. Thank you. And Sam, same to you.
So inclusive events is my avocation. It's my passion. If I can bring accessibility associations and events together, the chef's kiss would go out to the world. So you can find me on LinkedIn, and it's Samantha Evans. You can also write to me. You can find me on in our organization. But I recommend, in second, talk to your neurodivergent attendees. Put out a call in a safe place to have a quiet and a welcoming environment to get their feedback. Ask directly, but be ready when the company comes up to you at the event and goes, I have to tell you what I didn't like about this. Make the time. They've made the effort, record it, sit down, and then come back and say, thank you for sharing with me. So be ready for the feedback, however it comes.
Wonderful. Thank you. And then I'll just add to that. Again, this will be recorded and it will be available on our website, and I'll be sending out the link. So share away. There's no gate to this, because we want everybody to have this as much as possible. We do not like gating our content. We've also written an article that's on our blog, omnipress.com/blog, that goes into some greater detail on some of the things that we just talked about today. And there's also a link to a few resources that you can start with. A great event checklist from a group called the New Project, NEU Project. Highly recommend taking a look at that, as well as a few other resources. So with that, I know we're just over time, and part of it's because I was having issues with the captions. I apologize, but I'm glad we got it figured out. So thank you all for joining. Samantha, Megan, thank you so much for joining me on this topic, and I cannot wait to just continue this conversation in the education.
Thanks to all of you for making time to come and learn and grow and be more inclusive. This is how it starts.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye.